All right, Baba Yaga here, and I am going to be doing a video here with you guys on how I use the TPO chart, mainly for finding key levels and just some of the things that I look for while I'm doing that work for like a weekly plan. And yeah, so sit back, enjoy. Let me throw this up on the screen, and we'll get started. Okay, so here we have TPO chart. And a lot of this is already marked up because I have already worked through my weekly plan. Um, but the first thing you'll notice about this TPO chart is that the study settings here, I want to just show you what I am looking at. So let's go in here to the TPO chart itself. So increment and ticks is important for like poor highs. That's kind of if I don't get a couple ticks of excess, a dollar or so of excess, is going to draw a poor high line, and I will use those usually as just targets or goals, nothing special. But I just pulled these settings up here so you can take a look at them. You can pause it at any point um, to grab anything if you were going to build your own. Um, if you're going to build your own TPO chart and wanted to reference the settings that I'm using. So I'll scroll back through them again. You can pause it at any point. Also, if anybody wants this chart, I'm fine to share it to you. Not a big deal at all. I have the like some of this other stuff I have hidden. Don't even really reference it. So let's get into what I am looking for and looking at. So you'll notice that there is the TPO, and if you're new, the TPO just stands for time, price, opportunity. And the goal of TPO specifically for me, it shows me where we spent time. So each 30-minute segment of the day is divided into letters. And so you have A period, B period, C period. A period and B period um, would be the first 30 minutes, the next 30 minutes, and so on throughout the day. And when I'm referencing TPO, most of the time I'm ignoring, for the purposes of planning, I'm ignoring the overnight inventory. So for the most part on this chart, except for Thursdays, which I'm not sure why it's still hanging in there. But yeah, it'll go away eventually. I think tomorrow it'll go away. So when I come in at the beginning of a week, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find where I have balance areas and where I have what I call and what I feel like kind of Flary coined as balance areas and island days. I don't know if he coined it, but he definitely turned me on to that idea of an island day. So let's talk about what defines a balance area. So for me, a balance area is defined as a day that has overlapping value to the right, from a TPO perspective. So the value for TPO is this gray area, and then the yellow or orange area is outside of value. So where we spent our time, we spent our time in here on this day. And I go over to the next day and we spend our time in here. And then we skip this day's irrelevant and we look at Friday and we spend our time in here. Kind of a balanced day, closing on the highs. We spent most of our time in here. Well, if you look at value, is overlapping these 3 days, okay, and was supported by, we'll get into this in a minute, but it was supported by this day, which this day is unique. So when I have overlapping value to the right, I'll box that. I use a blue box, nothing special. I don't even try to get perfectly specific on the high. I'm just you know, drawing the box. And so for me, um, it's pivotal or important to pay attention to the edges of balance. So why? What do I infer from a balance area? Well, I infer potential. The potential to rotate through a balance area is one that I am always looking for. That is a high probability trade. Generally, a rotation to the midpoint of where value is. So we can include this day for now, just for the sake of this example. I'll merge these profiles together and I'll come up with two things. One, TPO point of control for this balance area, value area high and low for this balance area, and volume point of control for this balance area. And so in theory, we could take this, drag it over here, and we go for this inventory, the balanced inventory at this local high, this swing high. This 12,860 to 12,880 is pivotal. Losing that would rotate us down. Now, I have this labeled as a pivotal zone as well. Now, why is that? That was labeled last week as well. 814 was kind of our bullish above line. If you go back and look at that plan, because that was the top of an old balance area that we had before. And that old balance area went from the base of this was news, 12,314, and I have that labeled as pivotal as well. And then the high of that balance area is 12,814. So about a 500 point range. Now, getting back inside of an old balance area can oftentimes glean rotation down to one of two things. This day, which is an island day, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we can rotate down into an island day, maybe to island day, volume point of control, TPO point of control. As if it's untested, that's a great place to look for response. To go down to a 4 hour or 1 hour and try to carve out a saucy level in that area and look for a bid. Look for this value rotation to hold up. But we'll get to that in a minute. So if you think about inventory that's in here, and we can look at this for now, and you think of auctioning and buyers and sellers, if we rotate up out of, and remember we consolidated this balance area into one big TPO picture and one big volume profile picture. This old blue line right here is an old balance area high that was an intermediate target for trading last week. So that trade last week, one of the trades, would be looking to target that 950 area as a test of an old balance area high that had previously been resistance or had held, right? Sellers stepped in there. So this idea of inventory being placed in here, we're going to, if let's say we explore up, we don't find acceptance, we do not have the buyers theoretically to push up, then the trade becomes to rotate through this inventory, possibly what I call abandon this inventory and go test to see if sellers can escape this inventory and explore price lower. If we rotate up and find buyers, then the high of that area becomes a great target to possibly hold and to look for sellers to attempt to be present enough to push for that rotation down. The low also becomes, if it's fairly untested, the low becomes a spot to entertain that same idea that if we rotate down, peak below balance, can't find acceptance, then what that tells us is this is fair for now, and the market is okay with, you know, the value that's presented here and rotating in that. Now I keep this as a pivotal spot, this 814, because it was where we kind of, um, whenever we were above that, we bid pretty aggressively. As we fell below that, we rotated down to find that real aggressive bid, about 100 points lower, 720s, 730s. This is where that really came in last week, and so that's something to keep an eye on Friday. So this isn't the end all be all. It gives, I would say, big picture, blunt perspective, and then you fine tune it down, going to a smaller time frame. So that first idea of balance areas being developed by overlapping value to the right, and then boxing those and then consolidating them would be the first thing that I would look for coming into a week. Now I'm going to undo all those merges just for the sake of keeping it like this, for now. Okay, now these are live spots, right? Like what we have here, this old balance area high, this top of value here, from this date, it's kind of up above everything else. So that's something to pay attention to. But yeah, that's the first thing I'll do is find balance areas. And that's how I find them. And that is the logic or the trades that can be gleaned from them. Rotating to the midpoint at least, testing halfway back up into, and then your, if you consolidate them together, that volume point of control, TPO point of control area for that entire inventory is something to pay attention to, as well as any primary LVNs. And you can think of this TPO, the time that we spent, as like that there's gravity there. And it goes to like the point of Banks' inventory chart. The same idea applies here, that if we rotate up into a balance area, or we rotate up into the heart of that value, that inventory, and we get much past the bottom 15% or so, then the likely scenario, even inside of a balance area, is to rotate the value of it. So something to keep an eye on. The other thing I look for is island days. So if we go just right here, we have a great example of an island day that has been supportive for this entire balancing act that's happened here. An island day is a day with no overlapping value to the right. So we see that this day has, if we extend the value of this day, or the balance area of this day from a TPO perspective, we extend that out, it is pretty untested. And then the TPO and volume point of control, which lie right in here against the primary LVN of this whole distribution, is also cleanly untested. So a lot of times the market will, this is, a gap up to this area, and then kind of close the gap and then go, right? And so island days can produce, or are the breadcrumbs that are left from an aggressive bid overnight. And then a lot of times we back test and go, right? Close the gap and go, that whole idea. Island days are reference points for kind of line in the sand. So like 644, line in the sand on if we move down. This would be the first place that I would look for some bid to possibly show up. If we lose 675, again, there's not a ton of meat on that trade from there down to there. So that's not a short I would be looking to take. There's not really enough movement there, but I would just sit on hands and wait to see, unless something really special showed up or there was a key spot from a hourly or 4 hour perspective. But definitely looking to get into the idea of taking, the bid side of a trade if this 644 area were to hold. And again, that's just the TPO value area and volume point of control. So VPOC and TPOC. I would also look to the low of balance and value as another place that we could test into and then find a bid out of. So 580s to 600, um, 580 to 600 would be another spot. And the reason why is testing the bottom of the TPO value, top of value from a volume perspective, and finding bidders that want to hold this and push back up. And then, just like with most anything, if we lose or leave an area and then we hold here or here, the trade idea is to go back and test what we lost or where we fell out of, um, and ultimately test that 675. So that trade from like the 590s up to test 675 could really be a cool trade that could give birth to acceptance back inside this balance. And then that's how you land these trades that are multi-day bullish, are trades that you are targeting to rotate all the way through. So island days can become those speed bumps in a sell-off, or those places inside of an island day could be places to look for a bid, to quote unquote catch a knife. But it also tells a story. It almost acts like a supportive shelf holding this, and then if we lose that supportive shelf, then we're going to rotate down to some extent to find another place. Now, another thing that I like to look for on a TPO chart, so that's island days, and they can be supportive and they can function as resistance. So let's say Monday we open below this Friday's value, and then I'll say on Monday we build all of our value from a TPO perspective and volume perspective, and it doesn't overlap that day. Then Friday becomes a great long target. If we find a bid, having the opportunity to push up to trade and take profit into the heart of that day would be a cool trade, or even that 814, that pivotal zone that we talked about before. What I don't have in a TPO chart is like thou shalt not pass levels. I don't really have those. So what you notice in a lot of my trading or a lot of my ideas is I'm looking to find good targets, sensible targets, and then I want to be a part of trading the market, ideally from the opening range out to these targets. In the past, I would look at let's just say an island day point of control as a place to go and pile into a big short. It is a good place to sell, but ideally I would like to be closing longs into that area, because to get to where there's a short, we have to move up to it. And so I try to be nimble in the way, or not nimble, but I try to be a little different in the way I think about levels or zones. And I try to trade from what the market gives me at the open out to these spots. And so while the second trade of the day may be a short, and depending on how solid the level is and what other confluence is, maybe there's an island day point of control and something, a lost level and heavy delta and all that, then sure, that might be a place where I price risk or innovate a short. But ideally, I'd be able to trade out to that, be finished with like a one sequence. And we've talked in the chat about like one sequence being a full size position that goes roughly 100 points. It gives me those 30, 45, 50, 60, 70, and then 100-point target ultimately as I scale out of it. That's like one sequence. And then if I'm feeling good and have the time and want to sit in front of the computer for that possible rotation back down off of whatever that resistance was, I can do that. But if you've traded in the room for any amount of time or been around, you know that I like to kind of be done. That one sequence usually gives me, with the size that whatever size I'm trading, gives me enough points for the day, and then anything else is kind of icing on the cake. So that's a little bit about applying like an island day or a key point of resistance or whatever. For this week specifically, I do anticipate finding some type of bid that shows up. Some type of bid that shows up, like say in the most extreme. Um, I don't know what would you call it, like the most extreme stretch of this week. Not really wanting to see, like it's going to be hard to be a buyer, or I find it hard to believe, at least without news or catalyst or something, that we see much below like this area right down here, this area in here, this island day maybe peeking below it a little bit, but I think that the trade that I would like to be stalking is a dip to be bought to get it. I do think we push below this 675, although it may hold, maybe a peak below this, and then acceptance back inside this multi-day balance, and in this long trade to rotate all the way through. Ultimately, testing this island day point of control from before, a volume point of control, TPO point of control box. So you see how, like, I would want to be long up, peeling off profit. Let's say I was long here, peeling off profit, 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 or sequential days of getting long and then targeting here, getting long, targeting up in here, getting long, targeting this, getting long, targeting this. Ultimately, for the week, I would love to see us challenge this area, which I know that's a lot of expansion, but I think we have some news, so who knows what could happen. But again, not looking to just go all in short here. I want to be long to test that, and that's the difference in applying this. Is not sitting on my hands and then piling in short here, but being a part of a trade that brings me up to test here. It's a different way of thinking. I think it's a better way and more profitable. So I pull island days from this chart. I pull balance days from this chart. And then I pull, like, on an island day, the bottom of, if we're coming down to it, like the bottom of value and balance will be a zone. A peak below an island day will be a zone, because it also lines up with this value, right? The bottom of value from this spike day, this news day. So, like, there's some confluence that we peak below that and find a bid. I wouldn't like to see, like I said, I wouldn't like to see a lot of traction below that. I think that really becomes damaging to the work that the Bulls have done so far. So bullish out of this area, ideally. Another thing that you'll see on this chart is SPs, single prints, here. And I just, again, I treat a lot of stuff on here like targets. Um, I treat a lot of these lines. A lot of people would say, "Oh, you know, single prints, we're going to find buyers." We may very well, but I would like to be a seller, to go find, to go see, right, to be peeling off profit into that, to something like a single print. There's a big storm outside right now. If you hear thunder or anything like that, but again, if we just go down, this area is important, 314, because it's the bottom of an old balance area, right? A 3-day balance area. This balance area ended in an island day that launched us up to another multi-day balance area that I anticipate will end in an island day, a rotation down, finding a bid, and then rotating back up to test what would be an island day above, ideally, and then further, right? So I have that, the high of that island day marked, even though we've tested through it, and then the low of this old balance day as another spot. Again, what we might test into and go. If I was short, definitely would be, taking some profit into this area as a target. And then we rotate even lower on the chart. We have another balance, or another island day, no overlapping values to the right, a clean, untested volume and TPO point of control. That would be another spot to be peeling off if I were short, possibly look into an hourly or 4 hour for a saucy level in this area. Delta to show up and be able to take a trade there. And then, I mean, we could just keep going back. This is a larger balance area here that we were in. And then, if whether it's news, call it what you want, but once we got above this, we traded essentially through, there's the thunder, We traded essentially through this balance area to the high of it. And then if we just drag a random line here, let's take this one for example. Um, it might look pretty like unimportant, or like, oh, we poke below it multiple times. But if you go to a smaller time frame, there would have been a trade to be had off of this 616 area to rotate up more than once off of this old balance area high. Once we trade through it kind of like that and bounce above it and go, I don't really look back to them very much. But you can't, like, I keep this top of value marked because we haven't tested it. So we haven't back tested the top of balance and value, or sorry, from TPO value and volume value since we left that, and really come back and tested it. So that's why 450 to 478 is on there. If you go to a like a daily chart, you'll see there's some saucy stuff around 450. So again, like 500 to 450 really needs to be the low of the week, if we get that low. But that needs to be about as far as buyers let this thing come back. If they lose that, it becomes really hard to be a buyer at 220, although there is a little something going on there on a daily chart as well as this. But this isn't necessarily a strategy video so much as just how do I look at TPO. Something else is you'll hear a lot of people that use TPO talk about poor highs and weak highs. So if we look at my no, not this. If we look at this, and we go down to where's it at? Extend poor high, poor low. So what is a poor high or a poor low? I think I briefly mentioned it. This gray line is an old poor high. A poor high is when we don't have excess. So we have an ugly auction. That's when we don't have excess like this. So let me show you for those of you that aren't familiar. So excess would be when we have multiple single letters sticking above, right? That's like a blow off top. And a poor high is poor because of the lack of that. So there's a poor low. There's like one tick of excess. You oftentimes want to see that get cleaned up. Now, a weak reference is weak. As another thing that you'll hear TPO traders talk about. And a weak reference, easy way to remember it, it's a weak reference is based upon where the low or high, or where a level happens. And what makes it weak is that it's very mechanical. So a previous day high, for instance, this was a weak and poor. It was weak because it was right on top of that prior day. Even though it was an island day and it worked, it the idea was to clean it up. It was poor because it had no excess. So it was weak and a poor low, basically at the same time. A weak reference would be a bounce to the tick, which we're built on a very weak reference. Let me find it down here. Where is it? I remember it, and I thought I want to trade through. It was like 12.6 maybe. Let me see. Oh man, where is that? It stood out so hard when I looked back at this. I think it was here. I would say that was a weak reference because it was exactly volume. It was, I think it was, let's see. Yep, there you go. There's a weak reference. It's a weak reference because it is exactly to the tick um, the volume point of control from the prior day. See that? Or from 2 days prior. So that would be considered weak because who in the world can't see volume point of control from the day before, right? It's just like an obvious MGI, like market generated type of level that would be considered weak. When I saw that, I thought, ooh, we're gonna go that can generally, and the reason it's considered weak, it can generally indicate shorter time frame, smaller time frame, retail type trading that have weaker hands. And so the idea is that produces a bounce, sure, but then when we come back, those guys are not home. Those guys and gals are not home. And then the anticipation is to rotate through, clean up that weak reference, maybe find something a little more, you know, a little more that would take a little more work, like maybe this LVN that's also at the bottom of an old balance. That would be like a good strong reference. But a weak reference would be, overnight high holding the first test and go, or something like that. So weak references, poor references, people sometimes use them interchangeably. They mean something different. I use them as targets or to be indicative of what type of environment we're in. Because another thing could be that we were so bullish, or we're looking for such a bid that all it took was a weak reference like volume point of control from 2 days prior to rocket ship us up out of here. So it can be indicative of like sellers being very weak, or buyers being very strong, or both, right? Um, Here's an example of a poor high. Just noticed this right here would be an example of a poor high. One tick of excess. It's probably hard to see. Let me make it a little bigger. Okay. So it has like 2 ticks of excess, but that would have probably been a poor high that then got cleaned up, right? So poor highs, weak references, poor lows, balance areas, um, points of control on a TPO perspective and a volume perspective, the bottom of balance, the top of balance, island day high and low, the bottom of value and top of value of island days, are all places that I will note out on my chart and include in my plan. And here's the thing, guys. Like, I think the strongest thing from TPO is it's very visual and easy to see for me. It's like very easy to tell the story of what's happening. As far as ranking things in priority order for things I lean against, definitely the high and low of balance areas, and like the midpoint, and the balance area trade from balance area high to balance area low, or balance area low to balance area high. Inside of that idea is the value to value trade. Inside of that, if we get inside of let me show you what I'm talking about. I've kind of already showed you, but let's take this for example. Okay, that thunder's rolling out there big time. So we got back inside of this balance area, but we found buyers just back inside of value. So again, the high of balance and the high of value, if we're coming back into it, and then the low of value and the low of balance, which this is kind of, marking up here, would be another spot. So that's how I would rank them. I would say the balance area trades give great market context, give very actionable, and then the island days give the context or tell the story of like where the boundaries are, right? So like upper boundary, first lower boundary, second lower boundary, like real substantial, and then and so on and so forth. again, this is still on there because it's the top. If I consolidate this profile that created this big balance, that's the top of value for that area. And so those are the those are the ways I look at this, the way I organize it, the way I make a plan. I just start going back and going, what do we have around us? Oh, balance area, island day, balance area, da da da, and then tell a story. What's believable? Well, if we lose a bunch of string together a bunch of if then statements. If we lose this, then this, then this, then this, and so on and so forth. And I think making a great plan or making a plan that's built off of this helps you keep the bigger context at play when you get in intraday and you start doing stuff, taking trades, moving stuff around, stuff like that. Like this idea of balance, island, value, points of control. It tells you where inventory is in a macro sense, or I mean macro intraday, but bigger picture than 512 trade, right? So that's how I use it, man. I know this is a kind of a long video. Um, I have definitely talked for like I don't know, 40 minutes. Hopefully that really paints a picture of what I'm doing. And if you have any questions, hit me up in Discord, send me a message, catch us at one of the pop-ups, and we can talk through it. But I find TPO to be one of my primary ways to organize all this information into some actionable steps. And then what's beautiful is oftentimes if I go pull up a chart of like all the delta from the prior week and I want to find, where do we have the most delta at a price, which we have a, a chart that shows delta like a volume profile, but it's a delta profile by price. A lot of times, like one of these levels is going to line up with like one of the top three areas of where people were really buying and selling hard and creating a lot of delta, which can make that like an inflection point. So also a lot of times this information will line up with how I look at like a gain loss chart, or like looking at a daily picture and trying to zero in on hold levels and gain support and stuff like that. Lines up beautifully most often with TPO stuff. And so they really complement each other well in organizing inventory, who's winning, who's losing, and what's the potential is. So hopefully this was a beneficial 45 minutes or 40 minutes for you. And again, hit me up with any questions. I'll see you in the Discord, and thanks for watching.